Let us start our discussion with the First World War. Before we go into the details of the war, let us start our story a bit close to home. This is the India Gate in New Delhi. How many of you have had a chance to visit it? If you had visited it, what is it about the India Gate that you like the most? Is it the grand arch? Or is it the eternal flame? Or perhaps is it the ice cream truck which moves through this road? Well, if you look at this closely, does the monument not look very similar to the Arch of Constantine, the one in Rome which we had studied in class 7? Well, upon closer inspection, you will see that there are many engravings on the wall of the India Gate. So if you look closely at these engravings, these are not really any minute design really. These are names. Meghraj Singh, Mohan Singh. Well, these are the names of soldiers alongside their regiments. Now, who are these soldiers? Well, these soldiers were the 80,000 Indian soldiers who lost their lives in the First World War. Now, the question might come up as to why were they fighting in the First World War? Well, the First World War was a series of wars that were fought between 1914 to 1918 and fought primarily in Europe and parts of Asia like the Middle East. Nowhere is India directly involved. And why are Indian soldiers fighting this war where they aren't even involved? Well, if you think about it, these soldiers are a part of the British Indian Army. Well, India was a part of the British colonial empire. And since Britain itself was involved in the First World War, India automatically had to join the war effort. In this way, many colonies joined the war and made this the First World War. So the India Gate is nothing but a memorial commemorating the martyred soldiers. Now we will look at what exactly is this deadly war which took away the lives of 80,000 Indian soldiers alone. Besides many others, let us look at the First World War in detail. Before that, can you answer this simple question? The First World War broke out in which year? Is it 1917? Is it 1914? Is it 1922? Or is it 1938? Well, the correct answer is 1914. So many countries were involved in the First World War, of which the major countries were Germany, Austria-Hungary, France, Britain, and the United States of America. Now, in a war, there has to be two sides. So in this war, there were the Central Powers and there were the Allied Powers. Now, the Central Power is a geographical denomination. Well, the Allied Powers just means that they had an alliance between them. Let's look at these powers on the map of Europe to properly understand where they were. So over here you will see the Central Powers, as the name suggests, are in the center of Europe, the entire red portion. So you have Germany, you have Austria-Hungary, you have Turkey, and of course later on Bulgaria also joins the Central Powers. On the other hand, the Allied Powers comprise of Great Britain, France, then you have Russia, later on Italy joins, the story of which is pretty interesting. And also you have other countries like Serbia, Romania, who are joining much later. At the same time, we also saw the United States being involved. Well, the United States joined the war much later on the Allied front. So the question might come up now, why was it called the First World War? Why not anything else? Let us get into the nomenclature of the war as well. First things first. The First World War was not called the First World War from the very beginning. The war was actually known as the Great War of 1914. And this name stuck around for almost 20 years. This changed when the Second World War broke out, because it's pretty common sense that there cannot be the first of anything until and unless something succeeds it. After which everyone came to know that okay, the First World War is something which is preceding the Second World War, and therefore the Great War of 1914 became the First World War. But what about the fact that it was called a World War? Now we might think that the entire world fight against each other. Definitely not. All 195 countries cannot fight against each other simultaneously. Then why is it called a World War? Well, interconnected economies, rapid colonization, and industrialization, these three had made the world a smaller place towards the end of the 19th century. So you might ask, why is it interconnected economies? Well, when the countries were colonizing the other smaller countries, the colonial powers and their economies were getting connected to the colonies. So whatever is happening in the colonial power or their economies is also affecting the colonies. At the same time, when a colonization is happening, it's also leading to a political connection, which means the rise of a dictator in one country had the potential to disrupt the politics of a faraway African nation. And what is industrialization doing? Well, industrialization is leading to these countries rapidly arming themselves. And these countries were arming themselves with weapons that had more impact on life than ever before, which made the entire impact of the war feel like it's a worldwide phenomenon. Apart from this, the war was also called the First World War because it was the first war to be fought on sea, land, and air. For the first time, the skies are not the limit. The skies are some place the war is also being fought. Apart from that, it's also spreading to almost all the continents. Of the 6 inhabited continents, 4 of them were directly involved in the First World War. And finally, this was not one of those wars that's only fought in one location. The First World War was fought all throughout the world, and its impact also was faced all throughout the world. But of all these causes, the one cause which really made it the First World War with a worldwide impact is colonization. Now, how is colonization leading to the First World War? We are going to look at it now. You all must be aware of the expression, the sun never sets on the British Empire. Well, this was said because the British Empire was so massive that one of its territories was always in daylight. Such was the case of most European empires. Now, in this map you will see that almost all of the world somehow or the other is connected to the Europe. So over here you have Great Britain, and over here you have the British colonies, India being the predominant one, in Africa as well, Australia, and there are so many others. At the same time, if you look at the French Empire in pink, it is in Africa, it's also in Indonesia. So if you look at the world, to whom did the world belong to in 1914? This question is answered in a single word: to the Europeans. In fact, during 1914, almost 80% of the world was colonized by the Europeans. Now, these colonies joined the war indirectly, and often they were forced to join the war because their colonial masters either gave them promises of giving them independence or simply drew on them without even taking their permission. So just like India, almost 99 other countries joined the conflict only because they were a part of a certain European empire. Now what about those countries which did not join the war directly? Well, those countries or those colonies who did not join the war were still impacted by the war. So what did colonization actually do? Colonization provided the glue to bring the world together. Unfortunately, the glue was to bring the world together for war and not for peace. Now, the First World War was a first in another way as well. It was through the weapons. Well, before the First World War, weapons being used were muskets, which are like big rifles. Then there was the old and faithful sword, and also the cannon, which itself was a devastating weapon. But these weapons were to be left in the previous century, as the First World War, due to its rapid militarization and also industrialization, brought advanced technology into warfare. It was an era of modern warfare and modern weaponry. So for the first time in the history of warfare, military aircrafts were used in the First World War. Apart from aircrafts, for the first time in the history of warfare, tanks were used in the First World War. Now, tanks were introduced by England, and this will go on to become one of the most deadliest weapons of war. Nowadays, seeing a tank in a warfare situation is a common sight, but back then, imagine you are a child in 1914 and you wake up to hear these huge machines of war roll past your house. Imagine how that would feel. Now, apart from tanks, submarines were introduced by the Germans. These submarines were capable of destroying large warships from a long distance without even being detected. So what we see regarding the weaponry of the First World War is that these machines of war made the war itself expansive and destructive. Never before in any European war have all three frontiers been covered. And these weapons led the First World War to become one of the most destructive events of human history. So what did we see till now? We saw the major countries involved in the First World War. We also saw the nature of the war. Why was it called the First World War? And how it involved the entire world. We also saw the role of colonies in the war, and we saw the shift of technology and weapons that took place during the First World War. This wraps up the overview of the First World War. From the next video onwards, we would be looking at the causes of the First World War.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers, or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.